Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 2230. The topic is nutrition, and the title is Fear of Failure. Recently on Instagram, I asked a poll of what do people struggle with the most. Their options were what to do, consistency, motivation, and fear of failure. What wasn't a surprise to me was that fear of failure came in second place as to what people struggle with the most. Commonly, I believe that most people would think they struggle with what to do, meaning like what's the right training program, what's the right nutrition program. Then they might struggle with motivation, so once I know what to do, can I even get myself to do it? And then consistency is, okay, if I'm doing it, how can I stay doing it? I do it for a couple days or a couple weeks, and I always fall off. I would assume that most people would assume that fear of failure wouldn't be as much of a restrictive hindrance than it actually is. What's interesting is typically somebody who reaches out for personal training, like online coaching, the people I work with, they have motivation because they're motivated enough to reach out. They've usually already done some degree of something. They've already tried some diets. They've already tried some training. Maybe they've already reached some level of success. Or maybe they haven't at all, but they're like gung-ho, ready to go, and they're willing to, right? So if they've passed that step, meaning they've already reached out, they're talking to me, and they want to get going, there's motivation. Once they learn from me what they do, that's fine, that's my job. Consistency is how can I make it easy for them, then help them with roadblocks along the way. One of the larger challenges, and one thing that does come up quite often, and especially with type A personalities, especially with proactive people, is this fear of failure. Fear of failure may look different to each person, but commonly what it comes down to is this fear to fully commit. Because what if it doesn't work? Before we commit, we can say, well, I'm following the plan, but it's not really working. So you're lying to yourself, because if you're not committed to it and you're not following it, you don't have to be perfect. But let's say you want to be controlling the controllables to the best of your ability and improving your best over time. So you're always bettering your best. So let's say, for example, you're 80% adherent to your nutrition and training parameters, and you're always actively looking for ways to improve that 20% that you're missing. That is consistent enough. I would say that that's following the diet because you're constantly trying to get better. What I more commonly see, though, is when people say, I'm following the diet, but I'm eating this extra and this extra, or I'm skipping this meal, or I'm doing this. I'm following the training program, but I kind of skip that stuff. I don't really like this thing, so I'm not doing that. They're not controlling the controllables. They're actively choosing to not do things. That is not doing the thing. That's not following the plan. So if you are telling yourself, I'm following the plan, but I'm actively choosing not to do this component or that component, you're full of shit and you're not following the plan. If you don't believe doing those components are helpful, find out why. If you're working with a coach, ask them why that component is in place. If you're like, I don't care how helpful this is, I really just don't want to do it, talk to your coach and they'll find maybe a way around that. Or maybe they'll say, hey, you know what, without that, it might take us 20% longer, but that's fine if you're okay with that. So they can put it into parameters. They can talk with you. You just don't want to be doing it without them knowing it. And you don't want to be doing it without accepting the truth, meaning without you knowing it. The reason why is often people will say, I follow this diet, but the diet didn't work. Diets just don't work for me. Bullshit. Maybe that diet didn't fit you. So it was really hard to follow. You weren't motivated. You weren't consistent because it wasn't foods you enjoyed. It wasn't meal timings that you liked. It just didn't work with you. It didn't jive or fit into your life. Well, then you just find a new diet. You don't just do no diet, right? training. If you have a training program and you're supposed to follow it X, Y, Z, but you're doing X and Z because you don't like Y, talk to your coach. They'll fix it, figure it out, find some other ways around it. But what sometimes happens is people will hold back from fully following the programs because then if it doesn't work out, and they may have, perceived that it probably wouldn't, or maybe it wouldn't, what they want to have in reserve is something to blame. If I follow the nutrition program to a T and I don't get the outcome I want, well then, what's the problem? It must be me. Maybe there actually is something physiologically wrong with you. Maybe your hormones are out of whack. Maybe the type of diet doesn't work well. Some people respond really well to a ketogenic diet. Others respond poorly to a ketogenic diet. And that's mostly genetics. So it's finding the type of diet that fits you best. But if we don't follow the diet correctly and it doesn't work out, we can then blame the diet. But we also just created the problem. We weren't following it correctly. Therefore, we didn't quite get everything we expected because we were only following it, say, 70%. You're only going to get 70% of the outcome. So typically, people are holding back. This fear of failure causes them to not fully commit. The reason why they don't want to fully commit is because they don't want to be fully the problem. The other concern is if we fully commit and it doesn't work, what do I do then? If I don't commit and I don't ever reach my goals, so if I quote unquote, if I'm a failure, but I never really tried, there was the hope. You can live in the hope. Well, it would be better if, I could do it if I wanted to. Or, I could do it if it wasn't for this, it wasn't for that, it wasn't for this. So you can live with this hope that things could be better. And many people would prefer to live as a failure with hope than as a failure without. The downside is you're a failure either way, you're sad either way, you're still not living the life you want either way. The challenge of fully committing, giving yourself over to the process, and if it doesn't work, is you are the only one then, unless you have a really good coach who can help you, or like a good coach who's willing to learn and try other methods. But typically it's going to come down to a feeling of being on your own to finding another option. And if that option doesn't work, you have to find another option. If that option doesn't work, you have to find another option. And it can feel exhausting, it can feel overwhelming, and you can feel as though maybe there are no more options. I got very, very, very lucky in this aspect that when I was younger, at 15 years old, I decided I didn't like the body I had and I wanted to make changes. So I started learning about nutrition. I started experimenting. I have done, damn near every diet under the sun in the last 26 years. So I usually do diets for a minimum of 4 weeks, so 28 days. And that gives me time to experience the initial jolt of switching to a diet, then the prolonged kind of just misery in the middle, and then usually the body starts to adjust by like the last week, the 4th week, and you get an idea for whether this thing is or isn't for you. So first week, awful, feel like crap, trying to figure out all the right things to do. You're messing up half the time. Week 2, you get a little better than week 1. Week 3, you get finally in a little bit of a groove. Week 4, you're like, okay, I got the groove, I got the foods, got the timing, got everything down. Now how do I feel? What results am I seeing? If I'm like, you know what, this seems promising, I'll do it for longer. I've done diets for a lot longer, but typically the shortest I try is 4 weeks. So I have done vegan diet, vegetarian diet, keto diet, high carb diet, messed around with FODMAPs. I can't even name them all. You name anything, and I've done it. But how that's helped me is I have tried more diets that didn't work, quote unquote, than did. Meaning they didn't work for me because I felt like shit while doing them. They were schedules I didn't like fasting. Awful. I hated fasting, by the way. But I've tried it. I tried, every other day fasting. I tried, time block fasting where, okay, I'll eat between 6 and 10 p.m., or I'll only eat in the morning hours, or like I said, every other day fasting. I've tried a bunch of fasting styles. I've tried anything. And what I'll often find is there are aspects of it I liked, aspects I didn't, and I try to keep the things I liked. I try to get rid of the things I didn't. So if there was a component of a diet, like say it was meal frequency, I felt better when I got up and I had food within the first hour. So here's a little insight, this is how I currently structure my day, is if I get up and I eat within the first hour of being awake, I then usually have pretty good energy, especially if it's a high protein meal. And typically, if it's a high protein meal, whether I put fats with it or I don't, or it's high protein with moderate carb, meaning not a ton of carbs, I usually have pretty good sustained energy and I can get into my activities and not really paying attention to food for a while. I have to actually remind myself to eat in the middle of the day. But if I get up in the morning and I don't have anything, I kind of have low energy. I'm a little kind of I feel as though I can't concentrate on well. I'm not as driven and focused and fired up and ready to go. I'm just kind of meandering through my day. When given the option to do something or sit down, I'll sit down. So I'm just not this proactive, fiery, go-get-'em type. But if I eat within the first hour, I do. So I'm okay, so I know diet structures where I eat early works best for me. Then it becomes, okay, let me keep that component, but what do I eat? And I found if I eat a really high-carb meal, I don't like that. Kind of sluggish. Again, a little bit of brain fog, kind of get hungrier sooner. But if I have really high protein, like this morning, actually, I had Greek yogurt, 340 grams of Greek yogurt, which is a cup and a half of Greek yogurt, with a 30-gram scoop of protein powder mixed in. I'm doing a very low-calorie goal right now, where I'm limiting fats and carbs. And I'm doing this as an experiment. I'll come up with more details and share in social media and stuff in a little bit. But I'm trying to experiment for 30 days. And what it's relying on is high protein intake, around 300 grams of protein a day, and as minimal carbs and fats as I can do. And what I'm wanting to see is after you lose water weight, if I can maintain or at least achieve a significant amount of fat loss within this time, but be able to control cravings and be able to control the rebound coming out of it. In a sense, I'm actually testing what people are going to have to go through when they try Ozempic, Mounjaro, and GLP-1s. So the number one category growth that I had in 2024 was people trying to control the aftermath of GLP-1s. What happens is when they're on a GLP-1, they don't learn how to eat properly. So then when they come off the GLP-1 due to finances or health concerns, or they got to their ideal weight, well, what the hell do I do then? The problem is then they often feel like shit, they're hungry as hell, and they have no skill set in place. So how do they manage all of this coming out of that rebound? So I'm actually putting myself into that state, and then I'm going to navigate the rebound, even though I know how to do it. It's fun to refresh things and challenge yourself. But navigate that, make some documentation, and make some posts and stuff about it. So my breakfast right now, it was 60 grams of protein and whatever the hell, 240, 140, 300. I'd say mid 300s, calories. So probably not even that much. Actually, probably 280. Yeah, so it's straight protein, basically. 60 grams of protein and very minimal carbs and fats. There's no carbs and fats really in whey isolate protein powder. And then I do the 0% Chobani Greek yogurt. So there's really no fats or carbs in that as well. So it's just 60 grams of protein from those two sources, and then move on with my day. And that does leave you pretty hungry later on. But if you're active and busy, you can kind of get your way through it. But surprisingly, I actually feel pretty good. Like I have good digestion, not gassy, not bloaty, no like crash in energy, feeling actually pretty good. So what I'll find is when I experiment with different diets, like I said, I'll find components I like, such as eating early works best for me. But then I find components I don't like. So if it's a high carb based diet, maybe that's not going to work for my morning meal. But do I want carbs right before training? Do I feel fired up and excited and better energy for training when I have carbs? Sure. But the challenge with that is if I have a high carb meal of, say, fast digesting carbs, one of my favorite little treats is muffins. And the challenge, though, is I have to eat the muffin and work out start my workout within 5 or 10 minutes. If I eat the muffin and I just sit around and watch like a 20-minute YouTube video, all of a sudden my energy kind of wanes off. I get this like burst of energy from eating the muffin, but then all of a sudden a little bit of like a crash of energy from eating the muffin if I waited too long to start the workout. So it's learning like all these little timing elements and experiential things. And what I find for myself is the more I experiment, the more I just try shit, the more I learn what works and doesn't work, and the more I can find what works and create better outcomes over time. The challenge with fear of failure is if you only want to try things if they'll work, you're never going to be able to find the perfect thing, because how do you know yet? How do you know without experiment? How do you know without letting something possibly fall flat on your face of whether or not it'll be a good thing? You have to experiment. You have to try things. You have to find out what isn't good to find what is good. They come together, unfortunately, and being open to trying things is going to allow you to find more specific details and like just tactics and strategies and stuff that fits you best and allows you to be the most successful. So I have become the best that I can be so far. I'm bettering my best every day, only because I was willing to try stuff that maybe won't work. Because if it didn't work, I now knew I didn't have to do it. For the rest of my life, I can cross that off or revisit it way later on. But if I found something that did work, let me keep that and build on that. This fear of failure often holds people back because without trying anything, you don't know what the right thing actually is. What you end up doing is taking the word of a lot of people, but not knowing if that's true to you. You can find experts who will tell you that you should do a carnivore diet. You can find experts that will tell you that you should do a vegan diet. Well, if both can justify their reasons with research and anecdotal experience, how do you know which is right? You don't. They're two completely contradictory ways of doing nutrition. So which one is right for you? You don't know until you try one. And if you try the wrong one, who gives a shit? You try it, it didn't work out, you try the other one, move on. You have to develop this immunity to if things don't work out. One of the best ways to do that is to say, I'm not doing this for it to work. I'm doing this for me to learn. I want to learn from this experience. If it fails, I learned. If it succeeds, I learned. If it's anywhere in the middle, I learned. So you want to be willing to try things, even if they'll quote unquote fail. Because in failure, you learn. In failure, you find the elements that can lead to the next success. So you have to be willing to risk something not working out in order to eventually find what does work, right? Then the other aspects of fear of failure is failure, like you're experiencing it if you never try anything. So if you never try something and you're like, well, I don't want to be a failure. You are a failure because you're not trying. That's heavy, and it might suck to hear that, but if you don't want to try it because you're afraid to fail, you are where you would be if you were to fail. So you're already a failure. What I mean by this is, if I try something and it fails, I'll end up right back where I am. Well, if I don't try it, I am where I am. I'm in the same place. I'm in the same place whether I try it and it fails or whether I don't try it. So if I try it, end up here, and I call that a failure, I might as well just call here a failure already. So we're already a failure. If I don't try something, that is failure. If I do try it, that is a step towards success. Maybe it doesn't work. That's fine. I just learned what didn't work, and I try the next thing. You will never, ever, ever run out of things to try. And I can tell you this, from personal experience, trying at 15 years old, trying every diet under the sun. There's still diet strategies I still try and still experiment with 26 years later. There's training strategies and training experiments I still play with and practice 26 years later. And this is all I do all day, every day. So I passed the 10,000 rule like back in my 20s. So I am well into this adventure. And there is always something to try. If you can't think of something, there's a million videos on YouTube. There are a million books. You can always email me at brutalirongym@gmail.com. And I'll give you some ideas and strategies and resources. There's always something to try. So the fear of failure it's a misconception in the sense that if I try something and it fails, I'm a failure. You never learn what will eventually create success if you don't try things. And you're already a failure if you don't try things, because you are where you are. You are exactly where you would be if you failed. So you're already failed. Right? So that's maybe a dark humor way of looking at it, but it's motivated me. Because I'll think to myself is like, well, damn, if I try that, what happens if it doesn't work? Well, you're right here where you are right now, so you're already where it doesn't work. Well, shit, okay, I might as well try it then. Right? If I try and it works to any degree, I'm better than where I am right now. So it's like, as soon as you find an option to try, hell, why not? Like, the worst case scenario is you're no different than where you are. The best case scenario is you learn something to get you better than where you are. So the second you know something to do, just go do it. Like, why the hell would you not? You should be jumping at the opportunity to do anything that might get you something. It is challenging, though, whenever we try to aim for a goal and maybe we find out we can't do it. I've had plenty of those experiences in my life. So I'll use myself as an example. Is when I first got into lifting, I was 15 years old and I read magazines and bought Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, and I was like, man, that would be badass. To have that much muscle, be that lean, to eventually one day be a professional bodybuilder. At that time, I didn't know what it took, but they had diets in these magazines. They had training, workouts in these magazines. So I was like, well, I'll do the diets and I'll do the training. So I did the diets, I did the training. It worked somewhat, but not the way it worked for them. So that's like, okay, well, maybe I need the protein supplements. So I got the protein supplements once I got a job. And, got to get a little bit bigger, get a little bit leaner, but still don't look like them. Still don't have six-pack abs at 300 pounds and 20-inch arms and all that stuff. So over the years, I would try and experiment. And eventually I learned enough to realize there's a lot of drugs involved. There's a lot of extra supplements. And I was like, well, shit. I don't know enough about those. They're really expensive. I don't know where to get them. They have a lot of, seems like a lot of health consequences. Maybe, is that worth it? Maybe it's not worth it. Should I do it? Should I not do it? So you're kind of navigating, you're learning along the way, like, what does it really take? And then, do I want to do those things? Something else I think of is, like, related to that is Meredith and I, my wife Meredith, we met later in life in our 30s. And we've talked before about how a lot of our life to the point that her and I met didn't maybe go as we would have wanted to go. Or when you would look back, you'd be like, oh, I wish I could do that different, But if it went differently, if we could go back and do something differently, maybe I wouldn't have ever met Meredith. And now it's like, well, shit, I don't want to go back and change anything because I wouldn't have wanted to miss the opportunity to meet her. Does it mean that I, still wish I could have been a professional bodybuilder and have met Meredith? Well, hell yeah, of course. But one or the other, I'm going to choose Meredith. So there are things in life where the trade-off sometimes isn't worth what we thought the outcome would be. Another example is like, I have clients all the time and they're like, well, I want to look like this person or I want to achieve this. And I'm like, well, here's what you got to spend on food. Here's the time you have to give to training. Here's the event costs. Here's the scheduling. Here's all this stuff that like people do to be that level. And they're like, holy crap, that's a lot of money or that's a lot of time or I have a spouse, I have a job, I have kids. I can't do all of that. Okay, well, of it that you can do, let's do, and let's get the most results that we can get. But we might never get that end outcome. So you might be able to train as best as your schedule and abilities allow, eat as best in your schedule and abilities allow, and maybe you can get to a certain level of success. But maybe you never get to that finite top pinnacle level. Was it a failure? Was it a failure to get 50% there, 60% there, 70% there, 80% there? Is your definition of success, is what's going to improve the quality of your life an all or nothing thing? So I'm not a professional bodybuilder yet. I still have time. But the progress that I have made, was it worth the effort and time, even though I haven't reached a pro card yet? Hell yes, absolutely. So when I started all this stuff, I was 165 pounds, no visible abs, no visible veins. You could grab a fat roll around my midsection at 165 pounds. I have been as high as 295 pounds with lower body fat percentage than I had at 165. That's insane. That is a huge difference. With that difference came a lot of just benefit, a lot of confidence. I learned that in my abilities, when I set my mind to something, I could do it. And then I was able to apply that to other areas of life. I was able to apply that confidence to building relationships and friendships and trying to take opportunities and options available to me in life. Like when I started the business, started Brutal Iron Gym in 2011, I took out a loan and I signed a lease on a building and was like, oh dear God, like it's on me. There's nothing to save me. I've got to make this work. But through the confidence I built by gaining muscle and disciplining myself in nutrition and training, I was able to have the confidence to say, you know what, if I could do those things, why can't I do this? When I put my mind to that stuff, it works. I make progress, I see change. I'll do the same to this. So when we aim to pursue our goals, even within the pursuit, we find benefit. That alone is enough to justify trying your best, even if you're afraid you might never reach the desired outcome. So this fear of failure, it's not really failure if you've improved your life along the way. If you are better off for having tried, that's already success. The simple act of trying, the simple act of seeing progress, of making it some of the way, is enough to improve where your life was. That's success already. So maybe I never get a pro card. But am I happy that I tried? Abso-freaking-lutely. One of the other amazing and wonderful components of it is this podcast. The 3,000 clients I've had. Owning a business that has allowed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people a place of refuge, a place to get their health, like mental, emotional, physical health in place, a place to take care of themselves, to live out what I feel was God's purpose for my life. The pursuit of me trying to be my best has helped so many other people. There's no way I could ever regret it. Never. Maybe I never reached the outcome I wanted, but I'll be better off for having tried. I wonder if you redefine your definition of failure, if you might find the same thing to be true. Will you be better off for having tried? If so, try. And try to the best of your ability. What can also help is realizing that you're not limited to only your ability. There are coaches, there are resources like videos, books, podcasts. There is information aplenty in the world right now. So when you run out of what you have, go borrow from someone else. Okay? You will never run out of tactics. You will never run out of options if you never stop looking for them. If you never stop being open to them. So if you feel that your fear of failure is holding you back, redefine failure. One motivator for me is to remember that if I don't try, I'm exactly where I would be if I were to try and then give up. If I try it and give up, I come right back to where I am. If I never try it, I am where I am. The key then is to try and never give up. Keep trying. Keep trying. Learn, learn, learn. I hope that you give it your best. And then continue to better your best, continue to reach out to others, and never give up the fight. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know. My email, brutalirongym@gmail.com. You can always reach out on our website, www.brutalirongym.com. I wish you the best. If you need anything, let me know. If you like the podcast, please share the podcast. The more people we share it with, the more people we can help. If you like the podcast and you'd like to support the podcast, you can do a donation on our website. You can also buy your supplements from Nutricost.com using the code BrutalIron10 for a 10% discount. And we get a 10% commission on anything you spend, so that helps the podcast as well. And then if you like the information we share in the podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.